I mean, the only person I can think, I'm not a Swiftie,
Yeah.
but I would imagine if Taylor Swift said I'm only into sustainable
Yeah.
fashion.
Hi, and welcome to the Fashion Game Changers podcast. This podcast is dedicated to Fashion 2.0, which for us means an industry that is not only commercially profitable, but also sustainable for the planet. In every episode, we invite industry leaders to talk to us about the state of the industry and how their work is not only challenging, but disrupting the status quo by working on solutions that deliver both commercial and sustainable models to complex problems. I'm Bori, co-founder of The Note, a peer-to-peer platform that redefines pre-loved fashion by including brands in the circularity equation with the ultimate goal to close the loop of fashion. Before we start, I want to quickly thank Google for Nonprofit for their support and for The Note for sponsoring this podcast. On today's episode, I am honored to sit with Dax Lovegrove. Dax is the founder of Planet Positive and formerly led the developing of the sustainability strategies for Jimmy Choo, Versace, Swarovski, and WWF, covering initiatives on climate change, responsible production, circularity, ethical labor, diversity, and inclusion for over 20 years now. Dax is on the steering committee for the Institute of Positive Fashion for the British Fashion Council and is trustee at Earthwatch. He has a master's in sustainable development and is part of the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership alumni. I mean, you are a true game changer, an epitome of everything we have dreamed to see in an advisor, because you're one of the advisors for Note. So Dax, thank you so much for dedicating
Thanks for having me.
This time to be with us.
Good to be here.
So Dax, let's start with how it all started for you. When did you transition to sustainability?
I've been doing sustainability for about 22, 23 years. Back before I was in this field, I was working in internet solutions in the time where the internet boom was here. I was also in communications.
Yeah.
I was working around the Johannesburg Sustainability Summit in 2002. Companies were just starting to promote corporate social responsibility. And I thought, this is interesting, and I thought it's the future. So I was very keen to change. And so I went back to school, I went back to college, and now I'm working in sustainability.
Okay, so there wasn't a specific moment related to you and sustainability, some fact that you read or something that came across as as an occasion that made you switch careers, because it was a big switch.
I left school and I went to Africa and I went on safari. So it's built in me, environmentalism, but it took me 10 years to realize that I could work in it.
Okay.
So I was in consultancy for a long time, and the 2002, the summit kind of just woke me up, and I thought, actually, this is you can work in this field.
Okay, so saying this makes me think that being still putting in the effort to educate, to share information and share facts could be a turning point for some people, or the least a realization point that something in the world needs more attention, and for us to become more conscious, potentially even switch careers. So it is fantastic that the world is becoming more active when it comes to conferences and talks. Now, as you know, we're a startup and we work with brands, and we're extremely fortunate to see brands being more and more engaged. We're talking to some of the largest enterprises, which for us at some point felt unreal. Because of their magnitude. You, however, have been with these brands for a very long time, tackling sustainability issues at a time when sustainability wasn't as hot. So can you tell me how has being on the sustainable board of brands has changed over the years in terms of maybe priority? Has it always been a very high priority? Has it been gaining higher rank in terms of priority within the fashion corporations?
Well, 20 years ago, as you know, it was corporate social responsibility. And what that was companies doing nice things here and there. And then the environmental movement came. And as you know, I worked for WWF for 10 years. And CSR was turning into sustainability because the environmental groups were saying, we need to apply science to this.
Yeah.
You can't just do nice things. How do you do business in a sustainable way?
Yeah.
In a way that is done within the planet's environmental limits. So the science was sort of starting to play in. And companies and brands were starting to understand that just doing philanthropy and charity was not enough, and they had to change the way they were doing business. So, things have changed and things have matured, and we need to have a combination of innovation, but you also need to measure and manage things and do things better. So the whole agenda has matured, and companies are starting to get it. There's still lots of opportunities, but the whole agenda has evolved.
Okay. It's not a secret, the fact that fashion is one of the biggest polluters on this planet. The rank, in different, using different methodologies, different, whereas the second, third, or fifth, it doesn't matter. It does have a huge impact. Do you feel like we're lagging a little bit in the innovation when it comes to fashion? How quickly are we moving on sustainable solutions, sustainable models, being more conscious about the production, or are we on track?
The level of consciousness has risen because I think, as we all know, fashion has been in the media a long time now. The pressure is on, so fashion is feeling the heat to act. There are some leaders, but the majority of the fashion sector still has a long way to go. So how do we source materials responsibly and sustainably? How do you manage your carbon footprint in line with the latest science? If you look at the number of fashion businesses with a science-based carbon target, where you're halving emissions by 2030, they're still in the minority. So, and also on the ethical side of things, treating people well. There's one thing about basic labor protections, which a lot of companies are auditing their supply chains to make sure labor protections are in place, and sometimes they are, and very often they're not, because we all know about the Bangladesh stories and those sorts of things. But going beyond labor protections and good treatment of people in the supply chain, there's still a long way to go. So I think we still need to get deeper into sustainability.
So your answer is giving me a lot of touch points, but I want to address them one by one. And the first one is related to carbon tracking. You're saying that the minority of companies are able to scientifically measure their carbon footprint. And my question for you is, because you're into sustainable consultancy, are companies having internal teams? Is it that they're working with startups? Do we need more support on that front in terms of scientific carbon measuring for the majority of brands to actually become very aware of their impact? Because this is where we need to start, right? If we don't know the science and the exact math and the quantity of carbon which we are responsible for, it's much harder for us to address it, to mitigate it, etc. So how would you feel about the carbon tracking space?
There is a lot of carbon footprinting going on in the industry, and there's a lot of assistance. There's the Science-Based Target Initiative. There's lots of technical consultancies who can do the number crunching for brands. So all that's happening. But does that lead to science-based targets and science-based action?
Does it?
There's still a bit of a preoccupation of going carbon neutral in the operation, so scope 1 and 2. Whereas what the reports tell us is that 70% of the carbon footprint is in scope 3 in the supply chain.
Okay.
And so that's where the action needs to be. And so once you've set your target, you need to have an absolute carbon target, ideally aligning with halving emissions by 2030 and across scopes 1 to 3, with the main action on the supply chain. So how are companies switching to low carbon materials is one thing, and then how are companies working with suppliers, manufacturers, to help them set their targets and help them manage their carbon footprints. And that's the bit that's still not in the mainstream. So there's good things going on, but a deeper plan is still to come.
Okay. Tell me if I'm wrong, but because we used to work in impact assessing for some time, it has turned out that a lot of the brands that wanted to work with us and be a little bit more aware of their impact and go about mitigating it weren't actually 100% aware of their supply chain. So actually the mapping of the supply chain was a challenge for them. Have you come across this as a struggle as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a good, on the positive side, companies are now starting to source certified materials, so organic cotton or recycled polyester and those sorts of things, and those well-sourced materials are certified by various standards out there. But a full traceability of textiles and leathers,
Yeah.
as we know, is very difficult, isn't it? So companies are working on that. The regulations are coming that will make companies have full traceability, but that's normally a 2 to 3 year program minimum. So tracing cotton, leather back to the source is not easy.
Yeah, okay. And again, we're sticking to the brands for a little bit more. They are taking more care of the supply chain to the extent which they can. How about the volume of production, planning for the supply? We feel that technology, especially with AI coming in so strong, can we do a better job at predicting what needs to be produced to match supply a little bit better? Because we are also having this problem of overproduction, respectively, overstocking, and unnecessary waste being created, which is still a large part of the problem. Because I mean, production is the kind of at the core of the problem. But then all of this production, if undesirable, is leading to a ton of waste, which also we need to cope with different solutions, with a different set of solutions.
No, you're right. I mean, I think for any brand, and again, this is quite still rare to see, you need a full circular economy strategy that goes right across the value chain. So in the supply chain, are the materials being sourced responsibly, and is the brand sourcing recycled materials at every opportunity? Then in the manufacturing stage, are the offcuts being used? Is there remanufacturing? And then you're right, an overproduction project needs to be in place. So in merchandising and forecasting, that needs to improve. And you're absolutely right, overproduction is a major issue. How is that managed with the aid of technology, but also with the human input? So overproduction management needs to be central in a circular economy strategy. And then you need to obviously add it into the customer. What are the circular business models that you're engaging the customer with? So probably across the value chain, from sourcing to customer, there's probably 10 projects, one of which is an overproduction project.
Okay, and then I'm moving on to a little bit of the use phase, because it's very important. How are we as consumers trained to think about how are we using things? And I feel in the past years, we have gotten so used to super high accessibility of items, both price-wise, diversity-wise, even location-wise, which bundled with our, I think, DNA programmed need for instant gratification has just driven an enormous consumption trends. So do you feel that brands are engaging with retraining the consumer to consume a little bit more consciously, which of course in turn would reduce the number of sales, because if you're being more conscious with how much you buy and how long you use it, then you sell a little bit less, which leads to lower revenues. So what are brands doing, however, about teaching the consumer to be more conscious? Is it in their interest, or what are there any ways in which they're trying to keep revenues and more conscious consumption for the user in line?
Well, this is challenging, isn't it? Because we've had a long history of fast fashion, but also luxury companies, they move from one collection to the next. You have seasonal collections, you're convincing the customer they need the latest style, the latest season, and fast fashion is making the problem even worse. And that's in the customer psyche. But things are changing. In the pandemic, as you know, we started to see a bit of a shift to slow fashion. So a little bit of a move towards timeless capsules, towards less seasons, and that is shifting. And then if you look at, I always think France is the canary in the coal mine, because customers there are being bombarded with new regulations on how they travel, how they eat, how they dress. And you can imagine the French consumer is going to start experiencing these regulations and changing the way they live and choose things. So I think the future is a slower fashion model, more circularity. And then the other thing, to your point about how do you have a commercial business, there is this transition to services. So there'll always be fashion products.
Is it repair?
Exactly.
For example, that you...
So you could imagine in 2030, half the transactions could well be products and half of them could be services. So repair, resale, rental,
Yeah.
alongside products.
Okay.
And if we move to that shift of services alongside products, that helps generate revenues as well as, benefits for the, less pressure on natural resources.
Thank you very much for this perspective. As you know, we are a peer-to-peer marketplace for pre-loved fashion, and we are the first one to include brands in the equation. So what we are doing is that every single transaction that takes place, if the brand is our partner, we do share the profit with the brand. So we encourage the brands to support the circular economy by, for example, just promoting the note, saying, if you're no longer wearing your Massimo Dutti, sell it on the note. And then whenever we make a commission from someone reselling Massimo Dutti, we would share back commission with them. So we want to encourage them to be part of the circular economy, and naturally profits is a way to incentivize brands because they are losing market share to the secondhand economy. What model do you feel yields the highest environmental impact? So what circularity model yields the highest impact? And then which one is most profitable and easy, kind of the lowest hanging fruit for brands to tap in?
Well, it depends on the brand. So you might be a high street brand, you might be a luxury brand. I think what I would do is I would encourage every brand to look at the opportunities. So if you're looking at repair and reuse and recycle and resale and rental, assess where you think the fit might be for you.
Yeah.
Start to develop pilots, test the waters, understand what works with customers, what fails with customers. If you play, you learn, and you might fail, but then you play again and you evolve and you get better and better. So I would say, and you might have a mix of all those things. So it would seem that resale fits best with luxury.
Yeah.
But then you do see high street brands with subscription services, and that's another model.
Yeah.
So you've got to sort of assess, what are your peers doing? Where is the marketplace? What are the fantastic disruptors like Knoll doing to the marketplace? And it will come. I mean, as you know, the second-hand market is growing, 3 or 4 times faster than the primary market. It's still overall only 3 or 4% of the overall fashion market. But if you want growth, you would be sensible to get into what you're doing, the second-hand market.
At the same time, you were saying, you can, as a brand, you can test a few different models and you have to play. But I mean, you have been in the kitchen of some of the biggest brands, and it feels that it's not so easy to simply try things, and because these are major corporations, and you take, just the amount of spend that you put into building your brand, building your marketing, you cannot just experiment like this. So how are decisions being taken at the large corporations? How do you decide, how big or small are you piloting something with? How are you packaging it? I mean, for us, from our perspective, the process for a brand to go live is somewhere between 6 and 12 months, for everything from our end, we can go live in 2 weeks, everything to be technologically polished, etc. But, for the brand to go through all of the decision making and thinking of how are we going to package and push this thing. So how hard are these decisions for brands internally? And is this changing? Are they become a little bit less risk averse when it comes to working with startups?
You're right. If you are a big established brand who's got a 40, 50-year history, you're not normally very good at innovating and changing your business model, are you? Because you're built to sell things as quickly as possible, moving from one collection to another. However, the experimentation has come through outsourcing, through partnership. Yeah. So 3 or 4 years ago, we did see a flurry of partnerships with between established brands and The RealReal, Vestiaire Collective, and other exciting startups. The question for those brands now is, what have they learned from those partnerships, and what's the next step for them? Have they learned from those partnerships how are customers behaving in the second-hand market? Do they need to adapt their own operations to go with that new kind of market? So do they bring it in-house, or do they expand the partnership? So there are partnerships. It's now that sort of stage of what's the next step? What have they learned? How do they move forward?
Okay. So can you confirm, because for me this is a very interesting thing to be confirmed from someone inside the kitchen, So from your perspective, I just wanted to get a confirmation that the leadership of brands is aware, like genuinely aware of the impact of fashion. They genuinely do believe that solutions need to be found. They are more likely to experiment, and they are willing to work with smaller companies to look for solutions. Or are they? Would you rather? Is there a chance that they're still just putting one leg into the water just to test the waters of sustainability and for the consumers to see that, yeah, we are kind of in sustainability, but we want to see how this goes? Or are they genuinely invested? Is it on the fashion agenda that we all need to move towards sustainability one way or another we're going in?
Well, the first thing is, as we've talked about already, Bori, is that the media heat is on. So fashion has got a lot of pressure for being highly impactful on the environment, mistreating people in the supply chain and highly polluting. And so therefore, a lot of the fashion sector is responding to that media pressure, and they are starting to step up.
Yeah.
The other thing is they look at their competitors and they don't want to be left behind.
Yeah.
So they are looking at, their net zero strategy, the circular strategy, the diversity and inclusion strategy, the responsible sourcing strategy, the treatment of people in the supply chain. What is the strategy and how do they go beyond simple code of conduct audits? So the momentum is there. And then the other thing is regulations are building as well.
Yeah.
There are lots of anti-waste laws now, extended producer responsibility, and those are coming. So I think much of the fashion sector is waking up to this, and they are taking action. The question is, how deep is that action? So how broad and how wide and how deep is the plan? Are they covering all the bases? Are they active on all the core ESG issues? How deep are they going within each issue? That's the question. So you can always see plans where there's holes and gaps, and you want to work and plug those gaps. So there is momentum. And I think a lot of the fashion sector in the boardroom, they do absolutely get it. But if you're thinking in luxury, for example, new sustainability projects need to align with the luxury experience. So if you're working with a brand in luxury on resale, there has to be a luxury experience. Secondhand is quite scary to established brands.
Yeah.
They don't want it to cannibalize their existing business. That's the perceived threat.
Yeah.
So when they're looking at secondhand markets, there needs to be a luxury experience.
You're completely right, because one of the key concerns which we've been getting from luxury brands is, we want to control the secondhand experience, because for us a big part of the product is to deliver, this perfect ironed item packaged in the luxurious box, etc. And we are hearing this because the beautiful thing about being a startup is that you can evolve very quickly and adapt to the needs of the brands, because we are saying, we are consumer-centric and we want to hear what you need. So for example, one solution which we have developed additionally is when you're purchasing a new pair of a specific, I'm not going to name the brand now because the collaboration is not live, but when you purchase a new piece, actually in the box, already in the first-hand box, we include your packaging for your second-hand resale, so that when you decide to resell it later on, you have this beautiful bag with tissue paper to put it in and send it to improve the second-hand experience. So there are ways to address the needs, but it's very important for brands to communicate so that startups like us and others react to it and really help for this transition to happen faster. The reason why I asked you the previous question on is this a temporary trend, for brands stepping into sustainability or not, is simply because we saw this moment a little bit with inclusion of diversity. All of a sudden on the runway for a few years we would be seeing the different size models, which I feel was so beautiful and important, and now all of a sudden we look at the runway and there was a moment where we shifted again back to the very skinny, unsustainable, unattainable standard of beauty. So I'm very afraid for both diversity, inclusion and sustainability are agendas which I think should be long-term agendas. Even like not an agenda, it should be at the core. It should just be there on a daily basis in the boardroom and outside of it. So thank you for this perspective, and it's good to hear that people are getting it. But however, there is some risk in how it's actually implemented. So you touched a little bit on regulations, and I think the regulation space is not the most exciting ones, but At the same time, for me, it's fascinating and probably one of the big pillars of driving change. Can you share a little bit more on what are the latest, most important regulations, and how prepared are brands to address those regulations?
Yeah, so as we know that France has its anti-waste law, which is in place now, isn't it? So if you've got significant operations in France, you can no longer destroy unsold product. You can't destroy unused materials, can you? So that's already forcing companies to rethink managing waste and that sort of thing. In New York, the New York Fashion Act, which I think comes into play in the next year or so, that's forcing companies to improve traceability and to show that that they're managing impacts in the supply chain. And then widely across Europe, the extended producer responsibility rules in the next 2 years around that sort of period are coming into play as well, where retailers' brands will be more responsible for the things they are selling, and the responsibility for managing waste will lie with them. So I think they know, a lot of the companies know this is coming. They are getting prepared. They know things are changing. I think my advice would always be, there's packaging regulations as well. My advice is there are lots of regulations coming, some of which you won't understand in the near term, but get ahead of the regulatory curve. So have a broad and deep sustainability plan so that you are prepared. Don't wait for the regulations, just get on top of it, see what best practices is. I mean, I'm always saying, if you're a brand, look at what your competitors do, identify what best practice is, and start to push your best practices if you're on diversity and inclusion, if you're on circularity or on net zero, and that will prepare you.
Thank you so much. So I want to live in a fantasy world for a second and ask you, if we were to have limitless budget and talent, what would be one solution, or what would need to happen for us to transition to a sustainable industry, fashion industry, naturally?
Well, one thing we want, don't we, is a fashion industry that has zero waste. I mean, can we imagine, and it will happen eventually, it's just we need to bring the future forward. We need to accelerate it. Nothing ever gets thrown away. Can you imagine buying a fashion item, you cherish it for life, you hand it down to your family, you repair it, you restyle it, you update it, you reimagine it. It never gets thrown away.
Never gets thrown away. Or if it's thrown away, it's biodegradable, so we can look towards innovations as well.
Absolutely.
But just preventing waste, okay.
Or it's part of it. But the other thing I want to say is, the other part of it is anyone working in the supply chain and making the fashion items we enjoy, they are treated exceptionally well. They don't just have a legal minimum wage, they have a living wage. They enjoy life, they have a good working environment, they're empowered. That's the other part as well. So that would be the dream.
Okay, that would be the dream. Back in university, we had a framework which we always, not always, but we would usually follow. It was called MISI, Mutually Exclusive, Collectively Exhaustive. So I wanted to, to make an exercise, not now, but for you and I, maybe for some of the listeners later, to list down all of the all of the ways in which we could achieve waste-free industry. And I think a lot of this is going to spur ideas for innovation, maybe through creating materials that, if wasted, are not going to remain as waste, that if we circulate existing items, we are going to prevent waste. If we produce items to be transformative, we are seeing a lot of these Frankenstein designs where you can convert one shoe into a high heel, into a sandal, or a bag with 4 type of straps, and it converts. So there's so many. I feel there is so much space for innovation to achieve crucial goals for our civilization. So I'm just a random, spontaneous challenge for the listeners to think about cool ways in which we could make fashion waste-free. Let's move on to a little bit more personal questions about you. How are you juggling your work and being so engaged with a very highly responsible job, and having a family, and managing a conscious life at home as well?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, we're all busy. We want convenience. It's not easy for anyone, and I'm very, very far from perfect. I really do lots of bad things, but I have my electric motorbike, which I
Yeah.
love. It's a dream ride. It's the best way to travel. We have our holidays in Cornwall with the family.
Yeah.
So we're flying a lot less these days.
Yeah.
I do eat much less meat than I used to. I have the best lasagna in London you can get in Wimbledon. It's a vegetarian lasagna.
Okay.
I recycle as much as I can. So I am doing things
Yeah.
as well as I can. But, you know, we're
Yeah.
always...
Tell us the but. Tell us the what aren't you doing?
Well, I eat bad things. I don't always buy sustainable clothing. I try to when I can. I'm like everyone, you know. I go sometimes for quality and not sustainability. We have a petrol car at home, so for long journeys we do that. So, you know, I don't pretend I'm better than anyone else, and we all try and do our bit.
Yeah, but you know, some is still, you know, better than nothing. So
Yeah.
I would feel there was this quote I think about straws that it's not just one straw because we're 8 billion people. So you know, you preventing just one straw from your drink is already making the difference. So you getting an electric bike, sometimes shopping thrifted, sometimes avoiding meat. This is already, you know, a step forward.
Yeah.
Tell me about a habit that makes you happy and that contributes to you leading a better conscious life.
A habit.
Yeah, a habit.
Well, I try and keep fit and healthy, and I do a bit of cycling and a bit of running, and I'm having a break, but I'll be back in tennis, playing tennis soon. I think the other thing I try and do...
Are we going to see it at Wimbledon this year?
Not this year, but who knows in future.
Okay.
You know, I need a bit more training. And the other thing I try and do is, you know, be present. And I think my advice to anyone is listen to your Eckhart Tolle.
Okay. Tell us about a favorite book of yours that you recommend.
I've recently gone back to an old book.
Yeah, which one is
So, 1984 by George Orwell.
it? Okay, we'll link all of those below.
It's worth reading, and it's frightening because he has predicted so many things that are accurate. And you know, we're partly now in a surveillance society, which is always worrying. And also we've got fake news and propaganda, and it's very sad. But George Orwell predicted that kind of propaganda, the fake news that we see now. And as you know, one of the biggest threats to sustainability and sustainable living is disinformation and misinformation. Yeah. So it is frightening what that writer got right, and we are facing those challenges today. So to get into sustainable living, we need to face up to misinformation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of an off-topic fact, but yeah, a lot of people don't believe in you know, that we are having an environmental crisis. But what was even more funny to me is that I saw a super beautiful video on Instagram where a photographer who is usually a climber has stabilized his camera and shown a video of how, you know, it's showing the rotation of the Earth and then all of the stars. And I wanted to see the comments because it was so amazing. It was so beautiful that I wanted to see the comments. And below there was a person saying, you know, oh my God, this is another a fisheye type of, or fishbowl, how is it called? Like a fishbowl type of effect, which is lying that the Earth is, you know, round and not flat. It is flat, da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, wait, what? This is so funny. And then I saw 1,000 comments about people believing that the Earth is flat. So I'm like, okay, we still need to be educating people. We still, you know, you have the education curve. So when you think your bubble knows it, it's just, you know, 50% job done. You need to continue repeating. So it's very important that we stay educated, and I think to think critically about everything which we're being told, because on a daily basis, I mean, things are already made in such a way that just because of the format, because it looks in, for example, in a news format, you immediately perceive it as correct. So I think we as humans, we need to evolve a higher sense of being critical towards everything we see, everything that we shop, everything that it states as a marketing message or as news. So definitely I'm feeling this to be one of the threats of our modern times.
No, you're right. I mean, I think the environmental movement, and being at WWF, it's a very science-based organization. So as we know, the climate science, the nature science is there. But unfortunately now in politics, the far right is emerging in many nations across Europe, and then we've got strange things happening in the States, and there is a war on net zero.
Yeah.
There are some parts of politics who are against net zero.
Which is shocking, really, because we know the data, and if we should trust anything, it should be data and science more than opinions on Instagram. Who is, if one person could lead the change in fashion, who would that be?
I'm going to give two answers.
Okay.
I mean, the only person I can think, I'm not a Swiftie.
Yeah.
But I would imagine if Taylor Swift said I am only into sustainable fashion, she would have a major influence.
When she asked me, I said Beyonce, so I think you and I, we align well on.
I'm probably more of a Beyonce fan than a Swiftie. But the more boring answer is it's a movement.
It's a movement.
We need established brands. We need startups.
Yeah.
We need leaders in consumers and we need influencers. So it's a movement.
Okay. And who is one person we should invite to the Fashion Game Changers podcast? Taylor Swift, you're definitely invited. But who else we should invite to the podcast?
I would say one of my favorite people is Hannes, who is the chief exec of Banana Tex.
Okay.
Because Banana Tex is an incredible story. It's from banana, the wood plant of bananas, and also it's a cooperative in the Philippines. So socially and environmentally, the backstory is superb. So I would call on Banana Tex.
Okay, we will be very, very grateful if you help us with a connection there, so that we can extend an invitation. Dax, it has been such an honor to sit with you and to have this conversation. There is a ton more that can be said on a specific topic. So I actually would invite our listeners to be very proactive in posting questions that you would like to get answered and suggestions in which we could develop this podcast to really meet the needs of our listeners. So thank you so much as well for dedicating the time to support our podcast. Feel free to explore more of the episodes and support us by liking, sharing, subscribing, etc. So thank you so much, guys, and we hope to see you again in some of our next episodes. And Dax, once again, thank you.
Thank you.